người ta ấy.
Well, this is Gilmore Park, and it's almost impossible to recognise this area. There's so much building happening. Most of it is housing. I've said it before, probably a few times, but given the amount of housing that we're building, and you know, it was the same on the train from Glasgow to Edinburgh. We went the sort of long way through kind of areas that used to be industrial with coal mines and ironstone mines and things, and now there's just a lot of housing developments getting built. But what do all the people who live in these new housing developments work at, given that we've lost so much industry? You know, this was all the Fountain Brewery, William McEwen's Fountain Brewery at Fountain Bridge. I think the main body of the brewery was just across the road. It's all houses getting built, you know. I wanted to start here because I used to work in this building right behind me. I think this building, this is the only part of McEwen's Fountain Brewery that's still left. And I suspect it probably served a number of functions, but in the early 1970s I was a stationery stores clerk and actually worked below, in the basement, below ground level. So dealing with all the paperwork that hotels and pubs would use on a day-to-day basis. I only lasted about 9 months in this job. Then I moved across the road to be a labourer. I think there's probably more money labouring. But I only lasted a month doing that, you know. I remember being tasked to put up shelving in some dim bowels of a structure. And everywhere I looked there was guys hiding in corners drinking cans of beer. It was kind of grim, you know. You know, you're going to risk your job for a can of beer. We got to, you know, in working for Scottish and Newcastle breweries, you got 3 cans of beer every month, which was a bit of a struggle trying to get them home. But you know, I don't understand what these guys were doing other than drinking beer and stealing, you know. I remember, I mean, also the Tartan Social Club, which was the social club for Scottish Newcastle breweries in this area. And I remember just visiting there once. It was me and I managed to sign in a couple of bandmates. I was in a band at the time, I was in with the bass player and the drummer. And we had 1 pint, and in fact we didn't even have that 1 pint because we sat down, the drummer started sort of having a go or goading the bass player. It got to the stage where the bass player couldn't take it anymore and punched him. And I think in the process drinks went flying and we were thrown out of the Tartan Social Club. The good old days. I don't think. But that's, you know, I wanted to start this video here. And while, apart from this building, the whole of McEwen's Fountain Brewery has vanished in the same way that William Younger's Holyrood and Abbey breweries have also vanished. You know, these were certainly in the latter part of the 20th century. McEwen's and Younger's, Scottish Brewers, Scottish Newcastle. These were kind of the major brewers in Edinburgh. These are the ones that bought up all the smaller breweries and shut them down. But the main difference between this video and looking at breweries in Old Edinburgh and comparing that with breweries in Old Glasgow is that there are far more brewery buildings surviving here in Edinburgh. They're no longer breweries, they're generally repurposed, mostly for housing I think, but there's just an awful lot of them still standing. Compare that with Glasgow, where we just seem to have demolished practically everything. What is going on? Such a difference between the two sides of the country. But enough waffling, let's go. I think brewing in Edinburgh undoubtedly started with monks down at Holyrood Abbey, and over a period of time it would gradually have spread its way up the Royal Mile into the various closes and wynds leading off that thoroughfare. Just behind me is Bell's Wynd, and it was named after a John Bell who was a brewer a long time ago. And just near the top of this wynd there's a little sort of avenue that leads into Burnet's Close, named after a Samuel Burnet who was also a brewer way back in the 16th century. And I think these brewers were fairly small affairs, probably operations carried out in a basement or cellar, or maybe an outbuilding, brewing beer to supply inns and taverns in this area. These weren't the huge purpose-built brewing operations that appeared in the 18th century. Well, that's the Pleasance there, and this is Drummond Street, old police box here. The other side of the road there is the site of what is probably one of the first major purpose-built breweries in Edinburgh. It's Bell's Brewery. You can see it in an 1865 map, and that map is probably one of the very first really good maps of Edinburgh. It gives a lot of detail and information. It tells you that this is Bell's Brewery, and you can see the shape of it. It's been a brewery for a long time, and I think, like all, as is often the case, I think the original brewery is probably still in there somewhere. I think it's unlikely that it would have been demolished. I think it's more likely that the original brewery would have been added to make it more able to cope with increased orders as the years went by. And it changed hands any number of times. On a slightly later map, the next kind of good map of Edinburgh that also gives a lot of detail, you can see an additional brewery just on the right hand side, Forest's Brewery. And we'll go in and have a look just to see if there's anything recognisable through any of these arches there. But the Bell's Brewery, while it, as I say, was taken over any number of times, it was closed in 1934 by Customs and Excise because of, I think it was brewing irregularities, which I think must cover a multitude of sins, but they were clearly up to no good. Customs and Excise don't close you down for no good reason. But let's see if we can find any more details over there. You know, I don't think there's really any doubt that much of what we can see behind me is the original 18th century brewery, Bell's Brewery. I mean, the bit along the end looks as if it may be a little bit later. You know, it will have been added to over the centuries. It's a long time in operation, from the 1700s up until the 1930s. And there is a part of me that wonders if the owner of this brewery, Mr. Bell, was somehow related to John Bell, who was a brewer in that close that we saw near the beginning of the video, just off the Royal Mile. It's quite likely, you know. And again, it's just lovely to see this old building still here.
As you wander the streets of Edinburgh, it does at times seem that every turn of a corner brings yet another old brewery building into view, like the Burraloch Brewery by the Meadows.
Is this a brewery? You better believe it.
The Harriet Brewery in the Grassmarket. The Castle Brewery also in the Grassmarket. Maybe up there somewhere. The Argyll Brewery between Chambers Street and the Cowgate. And any number of brewery structures in the area of Holyrood and its palace.
Well, it's in this sort of area, not that far from Holyrood House, that we had the huge breweries of William Younger's. The Abbey Brewery and the Holyrood Brewery were both in this area, probably occupied a good part of the land here. And just if you look behind me, you see the large building with the small windows, and you look at it and you think, yeah, that's got to be a bit of a brewery there, or maybe a bit of a malt house. I sometimes think that a lot of today is going to be spent looking at structures and saying, is that a brewery? Is that a brewery? Surely that's a brewery, or it could be a malt house. There's going to be a lot of wondering going on today, I think. But nevertheless, it's absolutely certain as part of one of William Younger's breweries. The smaller building that I don't think... I'll show you in a minute, you maybe can't see it, I think I'm in the way, but there's a smaller building there, it's actually a very important structure. I used to wonder if that was part of Younger's Brewery. I think it might have been, but in actual fact I think it's an earlier structure. And apparently it's actually quite an important little structure. When Scotland was signing up to a union with England in 1707, seemingly some Scottish people weren't exactly happy with that, and the Scottish parliamentarians who were signing the treaty or the union with England felt unsafe. There was crowds gathering. It wasn't safe to be around. Apparently they actually went into that little structure there to sign the, what's it called, the Act of Union, 1707, you know. So in that little building, that's where Scotland's freedom was signed away. That's where it all ended. Is that a brewery? Yep. Although it is sometimes hard to tell the difference between breweries and maltings. They've got a similar kind of look about them. This is a little cobbled lane leading from Holyrood Park to whatever the road at the end is there. And it's called Croft on Rye. You know, it's funny, there's so many tourists in Edinburgh. This is a cobbled lane. I've got the camera tripod set up in a bit of pavement that's flat. And I was getting real scowls and bad looks from people, tourists, who had these kind of wheeled suitcases with the handles. You know, these suitcases on wheels that just make a horrendous noise. Why are the wheels made out of plastic? Could I not have made the wheels out of rubber to make it a little bit quieter? No, they just want to noise everybody up. So I've been going, oh, it's a glowers because I'm in their way. They want to go in this nice smooth pavement. They don't want to go in the cobbles because it's more difficult for them. Tough cookies. This is probably one of the kind of major brewing centres in Edinburgh, Croft and Rig. And there was two breweries in this lane. You had the St Anne's Brewery and the Croft and Rye. I think one was on one side of the lane, one was the other side. There was also maltings as well. And you know, this is really what this video is all about. I've said it, I think, earlier on. Here in Edinburgh, we just have so many old breweries still standing that have perhaps in most cases been repurposed and used for housing. It's hard to know, to be honest, whether they just built better brewery buildings here in Edinburgh. Maybe better quality sandstone. They were more able to withstand or, stand the test of time, and more longevity to them. And maybe in Glasgow we used a poorer quality sandstone and the buildings didn't quite last as long. Or maybe it is the case, as I perhaps said in a number of videos, that in Glasgow we don't care that much for our old buildings. We just knock stuff down without a great deal of thought. Here in Edinburgh, that's clearly not the case. And it's lovely to see these brewery buildings still standing in this beautiful little lane that right now is devoid of any of the noise of those horrible wheeled suitcase things. Well, I'm just off Colton Road here, and this, it used to be called North Back of Canongate, just at the foot of Colton Hill in the prison that used to be built there. And this is one of the pretty major brewing areas in Edinburgh, and there are a number of old breweries that are still standing. Now, I think housing in most cases, and we can actually see to them from here. You can see the gable end there and some kind of green wooden balcony bits. That, I think, is one brewery. And you can see what's clearly another one just over there. I mean, way at the far end of Colton Road, you used to have the Craig End Brewery. Then they had malt houses belonging to that brewery. Then you had the Carlton Hill Brewery. And then two other breweries, one on each side of this road. So this whole road was absolutely jam-packed with breweries. Must have been a good spot for whatever reason, maybe good water or something. But not that far away from where the Victorian breweries of William Younger's were built, the Abbey Brewery and the Holyrood Brewery. And again, we're not far from Croft and Rye or Croft and Rig. Sure, it's Croft and Rye. God knows.
The ultimate fate of many breweries was to be bought over and shut down, in most cases by Scottish brewers, later Scottish and Newcastle breweries, who themselves now no longer exist, being taken over by Heineken and Carlsberg in 2008.
You have no idea how much I love that little building. It's got all the charm of a fairy tale or something, you know, or something out of Lord of the Rings, hobbits and little people. It's right beside Holyrood Palace and Holyrood Abbey. And of course the big question is, was it a brewery? I think it's called Queen Mary's Bathhouse or something like that, you know. I kind of a little bit, not convinced if I'm honest, you know. I think if I was a queen in the palace, would I want to come outside to go into another building and have my bath? I'd want my bath in the palace. And given that this was at one time pretty much the brewing heart of Edinburgh, the North Bank of Canongate, North Bank of Canongate and Crofton Rye, or Crofton Rig. It wouldn't surprise me if at one time in the many hundreds of years in which this building has existed, that somebody would have been brewing in there. You never really know. And this is where I'm going to end the video. The sun's out. We've had a lovely day. Maybe I learned a little bit about breweries, but not too much. I'm Eddie Burns. Bye for now.